Hey, good morning. Good morning to everybody here in Berlin. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are online. It's great to have you here. The final ones coming in. There are spare seats in the front row, so please be welcome. So you can involve you in the upcoming games. My name is Ralf Süthoff. I'm the director of the Center for Humanitarian Action. Really a warm welcome to all of you. It's great to have you here. As many of you know, we love hosting these conferences. It's the 6th in a row. So we must admit this year our Romans got a little stress test. Imagine you organize a conference on the future of the humanitarian system, and this very system is falling apart while you prep. Imagine you aim at a strong focus on the German government as a top donor, and the moment you prep, the German government is falling apart. Imagine you don't have a new government and not any budget until yesterday, and some might say we don't have a budget anyhow anymore on the humanitarian side. And imagine last night you get a call that, speaking of politicization in this era, that your keynote speaker needs to attend a vote against AfD, becoming a top chair in one of our committees right this minute. So just as a heads up that one of our keynote speakers, Professor Castellucci, can't make it this morning because he has to indeed vote to ensure a majority against the right extremists right now, and sorry for that. Imagine you plan a conference and the weather forecast, while it's raining now in Berlin, is 30 degrees tomorrow and I think 28 this afternoon. And you think, well, everybody will aim going at the beaches and not talking once again 48 hours about the world's crisis. But imagine you're all here. Big thank you for that. Imagine we are sold out. A big, big thank you for that and for attending. And imagine we have more than 550 registered participants online worldwide. Speaking of a big thank you, many of you have bought a ticket this year, and many thanks for that. We really highly appreciate. However, of course, this cannot cover by nature a conference cost like this one. So first of all, maybe let's give a really big hand on the 14 supporters we have who enable us to host such a conference, 40 German NGOs who stand with us in these challenging times and allow us to fund this conference and invite you and to host it for the next 2 days. Here they are. Please give a hand to the 14 supporters. However, of course, we have also very individual supporters, and let me name from the start the ones from our team, especially our admin team, especially our great students working overtime for days and weeks. With a big thank you to Philip, to Feli, to Angel, and a big, big thank you to the mastermind of this conference, Anne, somewhere in the back, our communication lead. A final thank you and a heads up goes to a video team which is pro bono with us and offered to us to do a conference video beyond the streaming, which you will know from the past. So please be aware there is a video team and we do take photos and we hope it's fine for all. Otherwise, please let us know. And many thanks for producing this video for us where the team is right now. When we planned this conference last year, fortunately, we aimed at discussing, for some reason, the mega theme Contested Aid, which is also the theme of our upcoming work plan as CHAR. But talking about imagination, be reassured we did not imagine how much aid would be contested anytime soon, and how much the questions we identified will turn into the key issues and hot potatoes since early 2025 with the dismantlement of US aid. For us, or we could make this a little test, who of you has understood the visual of our conference? I never do, so don't be shy. Any clue what this could be all about? Do you cite anything which could ring a bell? Okay, you are just, yes, please. Excellent. You are qualified for doing the visual next year. The red lines being shifting, tumbling, and a key challenge to reassure maybe all of us what the red lines in our sector are. In an era of a far more political aid sector, in an era, a new era of controversial processes about prioritization or hyper-prioritization, as it's called right now, and many, many challenges to donors, aid agencies, and think tanks, how to prioritize in a principled way and not a selfish one. And with respect to power imbalances, which might be now shifting or cemented forever, especially vis-à-vis Global South colleagues. Hundreds of thousands of local organizations these days are hit by the disruption of US aid, which raises major concerns about the so-called reset process. And as Hiba Kalfan shared in a podcast we did with her last week, she's been pretty blunt on that one and said, what we are doing right now has nothing to do with system change. So this is for sure a crucial moment and a great risk to get depressed. Having said that, I'd like to share one more quote, and maybe anybody, I would be impressed if anybody could guess who has shared this quote. If we can put it on screen, otherwise I just read it. Meaning the humanitarian system, somebody shared with me a quote, the humanitarian system will reform or die. Would anybody know what this one is about? Oh, it might be upcoming. Yeah, there it is. Any clue? It's coming from the UN. Where's Ramesh? It's coming from the UN emergency coordinator. But actually not the current one, but it's been shared by Valerie Amos in a meeting I had with her and a couple of colleagues actually in 2016. So it was ahead of the World Humanitarian Summit already. I will leave it to you if that's depressing, because we keep talking about the same things, apparently. Or it gives you hope, as after all, in these bleak times, 2016, looking ahead, apparently the humanitarian system did not die by any means. It actually started a rapid growth. It's been growing as never before, and surely a key question is this a scenario we want to work on again for the future? Is that a hope, or maybe a threat to some? And if so, if it shall be growing, is it in a way of a reset or a transformation? Or should we talk much more about everything aside of the international system? Tom Fletcher, the current UN emergency coordinator, admitted last week after the much-awaited meeting in Geneva of the so-called Interagency Steering Committee, another quote, "It has been hard to be strategic. We have not yet carved out enough space to think about radical renewal." We hope to provide some space for that for the next 2 days, so we can surely only put some spotlights on the debate, and a much more profound and participatory process is needed. Towards we like to kick off this participation with you and to ask you to join our survey. If you could take out your mobiles here in the audience and do it online as well. Sharing a survey, and please feel free to answer it over the course of the next minutes. We will share the results oh, I'm in the middle of some people QR coding, right? We will share the results a bit later, so take your time. But we would like to know, we talk so much about the so-called humanitarian reset. How would you name what it's all about? Is it a great opportunity? Is it about shrinking funds? Is it about power imbalances? You will see it once you do the QR code yourself. Is it about harmful but overdue processes? Is it about empty promises or just chaos? Make your choice, and happy to share the results a bit later. Before we kick off the conference, a few practical things from our side. The ones who know our conference will be very familiar with the setup today, with 3 panels on, we hope, key topics of relevance to you. However, tomorrow we want to aim at something different. Tomorrow we have a day which is completely Chatham House rule, which is on rather 2 sessions in workshop fishbowl style, while only finalizing with a panel, which again is Chatham House rule. Background is another quote to share. Who has ever heard the quote when somebody came back of a conference? The panels have been so boring, but the informal chats have been useful. Have you heard that? I'm sure you did. So what we try is to tackle this issue a bit by a second day of a conference, especially appreciating your personal attendance and that you make it here on site when you have the opportunity to have an opportunity to talk non-public on sensitive issues, And there are many key decisions you guys or many of you have to take these days, like do we want to change languages? How much do we give in the politicization of aid? Do we still talk about climate, gender, inclusion, etc., etc.? It would be great if you make use of this and come back tomorrow for frank discussions as well, but please do so today as well, to the extent possible here on the panel, and whenever you intervene. Talking about engagement, as indicated, we would have hoped, as every year, to bring more colleagues, especially from the Global South, to our conference. The limited time resources, our time resources on the side of Global South speakers to travel these days, the limited travel budgets, etc., which have been really an issue with all kind of colleagues invited from our side, have limited this, but we will keep working on this. We hope the outcome is still pretty good. We have to acknowledge a pretty gender imbalance in the conference because we have about 80% female speakers. And we have a great gender imbalance in it because for some reason most female speakers turned us down for the opening but agreed to the later sessions. So we have like a pretty male opening, as you might see in a minute, and then a series of females over the course of the conference. Speaking of inclusion and awareness, I would like also to invite our awareness person, which we have for our conference, which is Goda, and we'll share with you in which way she's available for every concerns you might have and what it's all about. Good morning, Goda.
Hello, thanks, Ralph, and a warm welcome for me as well. As mentioned by Ralph, I'm going to be the awareness person of this conference. So, like the last years, we're aiming to make this conference as power sensitive as possible. So if you have any concerns, you notice something, feel uncomfortable, or have any kind of other feedback, please let me know. I'll be here on site during both conference days, and you can also reach me on WhatsApp. There is a number on the posters somewhere in the room. And also there are 2 email addresses through which you can reach me. And there is also a possibility to provide anonymous feedback if you prefer to do it that way. So please use the designated QR code for that. And all of these ways of contacting me, as mentioned, are on the posters or here on the slide. For the online audience, and if you prefer to contact me after the conference, these communication channels will remain open. Another aspect that I would like to mention is that downstairs there is a quiet room which can be used at any time if you need to rest, and some quiet space, and there is also a prayer room. There are indications downstairs, and if you have difficulties finding them because it's a bit tricky, please let us know and we'll help you out. And yes, I would really like to encourage you to contact me in case you have any feedback. We would really love to hear how we can learn in case there are some learnings that we can do. And yes, I think that's it from me. Thank you.
Many thanks, Goda. Many thanks for this important work. And Goda is, by the way, a research fellow at CHAR. Didn't label her second most important function in all this, and will host one of our panels later on. On the housekeeping side, please be also reassured, as you might have cited already, if helpful, and especially also online, you have these transcriptions of everything discussed, also here on the screen. You can engage here in the hall with mics always at the end of each session. You can engage online in the Q&A section, and we will have a speaker here in the room who will bring up the highest rated questions in the chats. So please engage and make use of that. And I think apart from encouraging you, of course, to use social media with the hashtag CHAR25, I think we can kick it off. For this, I would like to invite now our opening speaker on the stage, which is Ramesh from Geneva. And please give a hand to our opening speaker on the keynote dialogue. Hi, Ramesh. Go there. So let's get reshuffling the papers after the cancellation last night. I hope I can manage. Ramesh Rajasingam, thank you so much that you are with us today and that you made it all the way in spite of these challenging times. One might say these are not challenging but unprecedented times, but you have such a broad experience and you're so long in the sector already. What's your perspective on this? You are from Sri Lanka, you are today the head and representative on UN-OCHA in Geneva. Before you served as the Deputy Emergency Relief Coordinator of OCHA. You've been based in Syria and Palestine, Afghanistan and Sudan. You are the right hand of Tom Fletcher, the UN Emergency Coordinator, or one might say maybe even both hands of him. So let me maybe kick it off with a question. What is the big deal? I mean, when you started in the humanitarian sector, the funding has been rising since then about 20 times, probably. So now the funding is going down maybe by a third or something. What's the big deal? Why are we all so excited and shocked by this? What would you say? Yes, please.
Thanks very much indeed, Ralph, and thanks for this welcome, for being here to CHA, for organizing this, and to all the supporters for CHA. It's really a pleasure to be here. And I think you worked with my previous boss on this as well, so in an earlier meeting. But thanks very much. It's a good question. I think there's no one answer to that question. You know, we are... Maybe I'll go back to the beginning of my career, because I first joined the UN in Afghanistan when the Soviets left. So it was just less than a year after they left, on the 15th of February 1989. And in early February 1990, I went to Afghanistan. No one wanted to go to Afghanistan, so I put my hand up. And it was a fantastic experience. That was, I would say, the beginning of the humanitarian program as we had it the last few years. Because it came, and obviously in Germany, you're very aware of it. It was the end of the Cold War. And you know, the whole issue of international humanitarian law, international humanitarian actors became much more prevalent. And you know, I misuse the word the golden age of humanitarian action, but I think the 1990s was a moment of optimism for international humanitarian action. And so I think we built on that. And we didn't start off effectively. We didn't start off efficiently. It was very inefficient. I think it was very ad hoc. But we built a system that, you know, came that soon after the Darfur and the crisis of the tsunami, we built a much more reliable, predictable operational system. But it was very international, and there was very little what we would talk about local actors involved in it, both in terms of implementation, in terms of leadership, but even in terms of consultation, although that has improved in recent years. So I think we had probably overstretched ourselves in many ways. Now, what's happened in terms of the collapse of this multilateral system has had an enormous impact on our work, on the work of the United Nations. So it's not just the humanitarians. We've seen peacekeeping operations cut by the Security Council with vetoes, etc., in many, many places. Now, peacekeeping operations were not necessarily the most effective operations, but they did bring some degree of peace and security to the population that was served, and some degree of protection. So multilateral action is in trouble. But the principles are clear, right? All the principles according to which we work, the rules-based system is clear. It's the actors who are responsible for upholding it who are now wavering, and there's inconsistency. And I think this is our main role. How do we re-engage with those actors to show that if you don't walk this path, which has been developed after a lot of pain, a lot of suffering. So it's a path of international rights, protections, obligations. This is where you'll go down to. You'll go back to where we were before, where it was the might is right principle, and basically you do what you need to do, and the military option is not necessarily the last option. So that's where we are today. As a result, we have lost our innocence in the UN. I think our principles of neutrality, impartiality, and independence are also being affected. So I think there are many things I think we need to address on this. That's the downside. The upside is we have also overstretched. We have begun doing things that we were not necessarily good at nor effective at. Why were we doing this? Because we happened to be the only actors on the ground at that time. There was a sense where humanitarian action went from being the actor of last resort to often now we're being the first port of call when there's a crisis. And then when the humanitarians are there, they feel that they've kept the situation from boiling over. So it's being managed. But it's not a solution. And the more you have this, the more vulnerability you create. Our program has grown. We have never come to a situation where we have said there's been a solution in the country. We've reduced the number of vulnerable populations of people, by millions. It's always increasing. So I think we have to use this moment now, this crisis, also to reimagine our work. And I can talk more about that as we go on. Thanks.
Many thanks for this opening. To summarize it, I hope in a fair way, it gives us an indication that we need to talk about much broader transformation than we've been able to in the past months. Would you agree with this one?
Reimagining the system means really breaking it down and then rebuilding it with some principles that we have ignored the last few years. And I think, as you mentioned, it came from the World Humanitarian Summit. Local actors have been pleading with us to be in the leadership position, to be engaged. They're more effective, they're more efficient, and they are more resilient and sustainable than we are. So how do we best use them? Knowing also that there are risks in that, and how would you manage those risks? And I think that's what we would really look to all of you, in fact, because I think in many cases it's the non-governmental organizations, the international ones who have that due diligence, that experience, the issue of ethics, the whole rules-based system in your blood, in your DNA. How do you also reflect this in your work so that it can be picked up in many cases by local actors who've never had a chance to act before in this field? So we will be looking very much to you for that inspiration, but also that work.
Mm-hmm. What would you say? You mentioned we have too many principles ignored in the past. Which one would you name on that one?
A few years ago, I was in another similar conference, and someone came up with this, what was it, a radical idea that, the humanitarians have four major principles. It's neutrality, impartiality, independence, and humanity, right? And this person was a political actor, and he said, well, basically, if you look at your principles, there's only one standing principle, and that's humanity. Everything else is and often is disposed of in many conflicts, etc., by actors. I think humanity is the one and I think in a way that's quite true. And humanity is the one that today I think is under attack as well. So if you lose that, I think you lose all the other principles.
And a bit staying maybe on that one, even if we didn't agree on it, but in which way would you say what needs to change to refocus on humanity for a start on the UN side?
I think there needs to be a consistent approach to the application of principles. And I think we need to be firm on those principles in any setting that we are. I think part of the reason that we're losing this multilateral impetus right now is because we apply the principles in an inconsistent manner depending on the crisis. And I think we ourselves are also guilty of that. So I think that consistent application of international law and rights and obligations, at least by humanitarians, wherever we are, mainly in our public statements, but also in the way we work and the way we carry ourselves is going to be important, because I foresee out of this current crisis, there will be more insecurity for us, because if we go to another crisis where you have similar conflict, those parties to the conflict will, and it's not a may, but they will say, well, I'm not sure you're neutral because you apply that inconsistently throughout your operation. So I think we have to model those principles wherever we are consistently. Mm.
Very interesting, many things. I mean, talking about principles and values, some argue, well, is this crisis mainly about funding, and I shared the figures before, or is it more about values, principles, and legitimacy, because the system is losing its legitimacy and the actors, many of them, have lost it for political reasons, for example. Do you see a threat? I mean, there will be always some sort of so-called humanitarian funding, but you could also argue, well, if it's set and used in a very geopolitical context, in a very politicized one, the basic nature of humanitarian aid is lost. So we might even face the end of humanitarian aid as it's defined if we don't really aim at pushing this back. Is there a risk which is even as big as that one, would you say?
There is a risk in that, and I think that risk has always been there. I don't think, if you were to be honest, I don't think we have ever properly answered that question right from the beginning, let's say 1990s, when the Humanitarian Project came into being. A child in the crisis in Angola in the 90s and a child in Bosnia in the 90s had a totally different set of assistance, support, etc. from actors. And there was a point in the Security Council in the 90s when, in fact, that question was asked by an African member state, said, you know, are these values cheaper in some areas or not? So I think that there's that element. I don't think it emanates from us. It emanates because resources come from actors, and those donors have their own political priorities as well. So I think that I don't think that's going to go away. We have to be realistic about that. But I think the argument we give should not change, and the argument we give should really focus on those furthest left behind, the most vulnerable, and we should always advocate for them wherever they are, whoever they are, in the same way. And that leads me to what we're doing now. So we're trying to answer that question. We've just been through what we call a hyper-prioritized review of the needs on the ground of all these populations affected by conflict and disaster. In December of last year, before this current crisis, we launched the Global Humanitarian Overview, and we were asking for a little over $45 billion to address the needs of almost 200 million people. These are people, main conflict situations: Gaza, Afghanistan, Sudan, Somalia, South Sudan, Congo, etc. And these are people that we've been assisting for a long time. As a result of the funding cut, mainly by the US, but not just by the US, we've seen it throughout. Many more donor countries are now openly transferring aid budgets to defense budgets, and there's this militarization of agenda as well. So as a result of this, we've done a hyper-prioritized exercise which is just over. It's online. And we've gone from targeting almost 200 million people to targeting 114 million people. So at least 80 million people will no longer be targeted by our operation. That's not to say that last year we did a great job finding or actually reaching the targeted people. But it does mean that there's going to be a significant population that will not even be considered when it comes to assistance as we go forward. So we're focusing on the most vulnerable populations. I don't want to use the word life-saving, but in many cases, these people are in a situation where the only assistance that they can get is from the international community. So we have to be much more consistent and strong in those operations. So I think in that sense, yes, there's a problem, but we hope that this increased prioritization will give donors a much better argument to spread their funds in a way where they feel more confident in the humanitarian actors to determine where the needs are, as opposed to donors saying it should be earmarked for these situations.
Mm-hmm. Maybe quickly linking this point to the ones we discussed before with a final question on the issue of values, principles, maybe with a double standard. I mean, many people discuss these days if this has reached a new dimension, the disrespect not only for international humanitarian law, but principles, the need of access, just comparing the situation in Gaza and Ukraine, just comparing how Western donors, including Germany, deal with the Gaza situation in Israel versus the situation in Ukraine, talking about sanctions not applied, weapon bans, etc. Do you see an issue? Is that a symbol of politicized aid? And is this also an issue in prioritizing and asking donors to follow your prioritization proposals?
There's a big risk. There's a huge risk of militarization. I think what we have to do in the humanitarian community is, and even the ICRC went through it a few years ago, how do we double down on the real reason that we are doing our work, to provide a really good argument for why we are there, why we're supporting the local actors, why we're bringing assistance into a situation, and be honest about it. And we have to learn to say no as well. In many cases, many of these countries, because we're the only ones on the ground, people expect us to start doing more resilient development type work independently and impartially, and that's not always the best way to go. So I think in certain protracted situations, we as humanitarians also have to learn to let go and say, no, this job is better done by development actors, and then advocate much more strongly for that, as opposed to taking the money and working in those situations where we may not be. So we need to double down on the root of our work. Why are we here? Supporting affected populations, and then from there come to donors, etc., and take that forward. I think that's going to be incumbent on us to be able to, and I hope that this new reimagining of the system that my boss Tom Fletcher is undertaking with the Interagency Standing Committee will do that. And I think there's been a lot of discussions between all of you through the Interagency Standing Committee, Tom Fletcher, to make sure that we are much more localized. And that is a word I use reluctantly, but it really means devolving power to local actors to sit at the decision-making table, to receive money, to implement it, and also to be much more sustainable in the way they do the work. That's one thing. The first one is to define that work. And that goes back to, in this hyper-prioritized setting, we have 5 categories of vulnerability. Number 4 and 5 are the most vulnerable. Last year, we were also addressing people in number 3. This year, it'll be just 4 and 5 mainly. That's the prioritization, so that we're going to define our work very clearly. These are people in real humanitarian situations, not in abject poverty because the economy is failing or there's a governance issue. The second one is to deliver with much more responsibly and effectively in our work. You reimagine the system to deliver much better assistance, and that assistance is dependent on what the local community asks you to do, not what we think necessarily what they would be doing. I think we are improving on that, and we've improved on in the last few years. Then it goes back to what I said in terms of devolving power, and then finally we need to defend those principles that we spoke about earlier on much more strongly and much more consistently.
And to navigate this prioritization, obviously we need to navigate political issues as well. I mean, I don't want to enforce you in making a statement, but I mean, the highest needs for sure in level 1 to 5 terms we see these days in Gaza, and we see not the political pressure to make sure these people can be reached, as some people criticize. You touched already on moving the system far more to a locally led one. And I mean, there's a major concern not only of NEAR, but of many Global South colleagues, and they can raise their voice much better their own over the course of this panel. That there's been a lot of talk about doing so, and we touched already on the World Humanitarian Summit. It's been one of the key objectives. And Tom Fletcher said as well, we all need to think about which power to give away, but at the same time, no, there are hardly any precedences people give power away their own. What shall give people hope that this time it's different? This time it's really about the local ones.
So we have made a commitment in OCHA, in my organization. As you know, after the World Humanitarian Summit, there were some targets that were laid out in terms of support to local actors. None of those targets have been met except one target, and that target is the commitment from OCHA to make sure that at least 25% of our country-based pool funds. These are the pool funds that we cannot use ourselves. They're only for implementation of work, goes to local actors. And if anything, we have exceeded that target. We are now, I think, at over 40% of assistance has gone to local actors through the country-based pool funds. Our pledge as of last week from Tom Fletcher is to make that at least 70% of the country-based pool funds to go to local actors. And at the same time, we're also speaking to all the donors to see if they can make sure that 33% of their funding goes to country-based pool funds, because flexible funding to the leadership at the field level for them to determine what's the best operation. So the Somali operation can be totally different to the South Sudan operation, because the local actors, together with the country team, have determined that this indigenous way of working is the best way. So, and this is what they will use the flexible financing for. So we are pledging ourselves to that. I'm pretty confident we can achieve that. We've achieved that in many countries already. But it does mean that donors also would need to come forward. And we would need to work with you as the international NGO system to help deliver that message, because in many countries, the local actors do not necessarily have the capacity nor the structures for due diligence. And as you know, money, if it's mismanaged, is the worst thing that can happen to us, because it can really undermine the system. So you need to help us with that due diligence, with capacity building, and to transfer this message to local actors as well.
Just a quick one on the pooled funds and OCHA's role in it. I mean, skeptics argue, well, OCHA is proposing to channel everything through the country-based pooled funds. OCHA is coordinating. How would you counter this argument that this is more pro domo than on real change, as some might argue?
It depends what you do with the 70% that we have promised to local actors. If that is a genuine, if that is spent genuinely with local actors, and not just that, but the work that we do is very much in line with what the local actors have asked us to do, and the way to do it. So in some cases, for example, as you know, many of you know about the cluster system that we operate. In many cases, it may not be the most appropriate system in a situation, but it's a local team with the local actors that will have to determine how that changes or how that is modified. Similarly, we might go to an area-based support where you work entirely with the community, and the community tells you what to do. You know, I was in South Sudan a year ago, and I went and spoke to a displaced population group. The men who were the leaders in the previous system before they were displaced, they have lost all that leadership. They are now displaced persons. They wanted to go back, reclaim the land, and reclaim their power. For the most part, the women said, actually, half and half. We would like to go back. We have our lands there. How can we gain a livelihood from the lands? But we don't want to uproot ourselves from here, because we have also become integrated in the community here. Our children have grown up here. They don't know the old home. They're going to school here. They have access to facilities. We would like to stay here. And the youth were saying, we have no idea what it was like in the old home. We want access to jobs, education, IT training. They want to get engaged with artificial intelligence. It's amazing, you know, in this community in South Sudan, how the advance in technology has brought communication to them. They also want to be part of the global trends. So how do we provide assistance to that? It's not water and shelter. We have to find something a little bit more innovative.
And there is some substantial way to go to make pooled funds, for example, just using it as a prominent example in this debate, more participatory and better engaging, more open for local actors to engage. Is that a fair critique, at least on the pooled funds as they are set up right now?
I think it can be strengthened, and I think this is one of the unknown things about the pool fund. The pool fund is managed by OCHA, but it's not coordinated by OCHA. Every pool fund, it's a joint decision making from the humanitarian country team, but the advisory group includes local actors represented, international NGOs represented, donors are represented, UN agencies, and it's led by I think, from my experience, it's one of the most inclusive coordination mechanisms we have in the field today. What we need to do is to make sure that local actors there are much stronger, and maybe in some certain cases even make sure that there are women-led organizations on that group. And I think also, to be honest, we need to make sure donors are more strongly represented there, not just with an individual representation. Because donors, if donors are not convinced of it, it won't operate.
Many thanks for that. We will have a full-fledged panel in the afternoon on pooled funds and locally led funding mechanisms with a lot of local representatives can share their perspectives, and really looking forward to that. Ramesh, a final point on what are your expectations on Germany, how to navigate this, how to ensure a true humanitarian reset. The Germans have co-authored a pretty blunt letter to the UN agencies to move faster with respect to reform, to look less on organizational interest and really on change. How did you read this letter? Let me put it this way. And what are your expectations? What could Germany do to ensure such change with the big agencies you have to coordinate?
So the letter is very welcome, and we are very much and Germany led that process, and we appreciate Germany's strategic leadership, not just as a donor, but a strategic leadership in the humanitarian field. And I think CHA also has a lot to do with that, so congratulations to you. So I think in this sense, we appreciate the letter, we appreciate the support. We've had many, many discussions with Germany. Germany will also take the chairmanship of the OCHA Donor Support Group on the 1st of July. And I think that we are very much looking forward to that experience. We all have the same, I think the same, first of all, we have the same values. The foundation is strong. I don't think we need to question the foundation. I think it's the recent developments in the political field that we need to look at. So we look to Germany for maintaining its leadership as a resource donor, but also as a strategic leader and thought leader in the humanitarian field. So that letter was very much appreciated. A couple of points from that. I think in many cases, the recent Interagency Standing Committee meeting addressed it. Much more support on local actors, localization. I think we have support for a much bigger focus on cash. I just recently saw a study that if you were to increase cash programming up to 50% in a humanitarian program, globally, we can reach 25 million more people. So much more focus on cash. I think there's a whole issue of the protection of civilians, especially women and girls. And it is about reimagining our system, making sure the clusters do not become a weight around your neck when you do these things, making sure that our coordination systems are light, agile, flexible, and that they are led in terms of the structure by the community's wishes as well. So we welcome the letter, we welcome Germany's support. The news on Friday was not so good in terms of the reduction. I'm sure you'll discuss it. I think that's going to make a huge impact on our work. But what we have promised is that we will identify the most vulnerable population to be served. We will also identify for Germany and for other donors those people who we used to assist but will no longer assist, because that's where the nexus must work. The development actors have to find an innovative way to come in and support South Sudan, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Somalia, where you have strong communities. You do not necessarily have conflict everywhere. So it's not really a humanitarian operation. You need development actors to come in there, obviously with political support.
Maybe a final question on the policy side and on change management, because might there be a tension and maybe also not always fair argument also from guys like us, for example, arguing, well, donors, you really have to incentivize, you really have to push for reform, you really have to manage that you put the right conditions on programming, on change, and telling, for example, the big players, you have to change, otherwise we won't fund you. At the same time, we keep asking for very flexible funding to make sure, well, let the experts decide and let them be agile, etc. Is there a tension we don't really address so far in our analysis, maybe, but also in our exchanges with donors who, even if they have the best will to manage, in some cases, that there is a tension between micromanaging to ensure change versus being flexible and ensure agility? Is that a point we need to be more honest, all of us?
Definitely. I think, and I think this, if we were to do a bit of introspection as humanitarians, I think we have been given a lot of flexibility by donors in terms of accountability for what we do. And I think we often say these are extraordinary situations. We can't necessarily do it the same way you would do it in a normal situation with all the due diligence. So I think in that sense, the donors have been quite flexible, at least with the UN. I know it's not necessarily so with NGOs. I think the thing we can't do well is to say, what happens if we don't deliver assistance? We speak about it in general terms, but we can't speak about it in terms of mortality, morbidity, indicators, etc. And if we were to focus on one thing going forward, I think it is to show the impact of humanitarian action on supporting a community and keeping them in a situation where their heads are above the water. We do not provide solutions. So we should not expect anyone to understand we provide those solutions. But our job is just to keep people's heads above the water until the solution or those actors come in to do that work. So I think we tend to go a little bit beyond what we are asked to do. So I think we need to improve on that. And I know, for example, now, with the pull-out of WFP from Yemen, we will undertake an internal study to see what the impact of that was, to better understand some lessons learned. But we would like very much to reach out to you. If you have any ideas on this in terms of the impact of humanitarian action, on those indicators, on the populations in need, we would really like to enter that discussion and to have that have a very open brainstorming with you.
Many thanks, Ramesh. Many thanks for this opening. For now, you will stay with us on the panel, so there will be an opportunity to ask all kinds of questions.